In this lesson, we'll overview populating the component tray. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to install the receiver and flight controller and install the ESCs.
Next, we're going to work on assembling the component tray. Now in this case, the power distribution board is already screwed in with these 4 screws. What we're going to focus on is how the rest of the components fit. I'm going to get started by plugging in the flight controller as well as the controller receiver. So now we can see where those wires go. I do want to make note that the port on the side for the micro USB is how we're going to program the controller. Now this controller has already been programmed, but when we get to actually plugging it in, we will have to remove it because of obstructions through the ESCs. So the flight controller is going to sit in this area, and when we're completely done, we're going to remove the double-sided tape and we're going to make sure that it stays in place. There's a little bit of preload from the side, so it does hold it in place just fine, but for actual flight, we want to make sure that it's nice and firm. We're going to use the features we created to hold the receiver. In this case, I'm actually going to use an earplug. So I'm going to squish it down on both sides and to press it in, and because these will expand, they'll allow it to hold that in place, and we don't have to worry about using adhesive tape or anything else to hold it in place. Its wire is going to come out of this hole, and we're going to zip tie it to the airframe at some point. One of the biggest challenges with assembling or designing your own quadcopter is going to be cable management. Now in this case, these cables can all be relatively short, but I left them long just in case we decide to use a different controller. But what we can do is we can pull the wires in this direction, and we can sort of tuck them in here. That way they're out of the way. Next, we're going to start to assemble the ESCs, and I want to make a note about plugging them in and where the wires need to go. Since I pre-wired everything, I have them numbered, so I know which one goes to 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the wire colors on the motors themselves correspond to the right colors on here, so I know the direction is right. When this gets assembled on the airframe, we have our micro CCD3 pointing forward, and we have motor 1, 2, 3, and 4 going around clockwise direction. So it's important when you start to assemble these that you remember which motor is going to be going in which location, so that way the wires can exit in the right spot. So motor number 1 is going to be in this orientation. So I'm going to place the ESC inside of the channel, and I want to make sure that the wires exit in the right place. So these are going to be pulled around, and these are going to be pulled around as well, and we'll place it into that slot, making sure that your power wires are out of the way. So now we can take the signal wire, as well as the power and ground, plug it into the power distribution board, and the wires can come out and go to our motor. So let's carry on putting a few more in. I'm going to reverse 4 so that its wires to the motor come out on the back corner. So that way it's a good reminder for me where these need to go. And again, your biggest challenge in this case is going to be cable management, because it's always going to be difficult to fit everything in to a small component tray. So now you can see we've got the ESC leads going out to the motor, which will be number 4, and the ones up front will be going out to number 1. So I'm going to take this point to plug a few things in and get these cables in the right place. This will be time-lapse now. One trick I like to do with these wires is I'm going to take a zip tie, come up from the bottom, and come down, and I'm going to use this zip tie to hold all the wires in place, and once everything's assembled we can cut and remove the zip tie. So we have power wires and ground wires, and we're going to rotate them into position. and tuck them in right next to the ESC. Just like that. Next, let's talk a bit about the connection from the ESC to the flight controller. Now, each of these has a black and a white wire. Now, the 3 pins on the flight controller correspond to ground at the bottom, power in the middle, and signal on top. So none of the ESCs get power from the flight controller with this wire, they only get signal and ground. So since this is number 1, it's going to connect to number 1, how it corresponds on the flight controller. Since this is number 4, it's going to go to the 4th set of pins. This leaves us 2 and 3 for the other ESCs. So now with both sets of wires, just to make it easier to work on, we're going to snip the zip ties. So that way we can rest on the battery straps. So now inside here we need to plug in the last 2 signal wires. So it's very important that we take a look and make sure we're getting them from the correct ESCs. So this one here is number 2. So again, the white wire is on top. And the last one over here is for number 4. Now again, this cable management is going to be a problem, and as we look at this, this is a great opportunity for a new revision to handle the cables a little bit better. So we're going to come through here and plug into the 3rd spot for motor number 3. So now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 ESCs. We've got the receiver plugged in. We've got the connectors that are going to go out to our motor. And we've also got the camera, and we've got the antenna receiver on the back end. So from our power distribution board, we have this last connector here that we need to plug in. This is going to power everything. So it only has a ground and a power on it. And remember, the middle pin is power, so we need to make sure that it's on the bottom 2 and that the upper pin for signal is exposed. This last one here is going to be the servo for our camera. So as we take a look at this, the camera connectors are going to be on the outside. The servo connector needs to come into this groove, tuck it in wherever it can go, and remember, power's in the middle, brown is ground in this case, and orange is signal. So the orange is going to be on the top pin, and the rest are going to follow. So now at this point, everything is plugged in. We have signal from the controller, we have the ESCs plugged in, we have the leads that are going to come out to our motors, and now at this point we need to simply bolt it on.